when we look at the big picture, it is important that we look at what is going on in people's minds. When we look at what is going on in people's minds, we look at it from different functional levels. And in this particular case, I am going to look at it from the point of view of what is generally considered to be ideology. It is never felt as ideology, but it is seen as ideology. And when we look at Sri Lanka, the ideology that is articulated and that finds its way into print in the contents of the education system is an ideology of conflict. On the one hand, it is an ideology of conflict between the Sinhala ethnicity and the Tamil ethnicity. We can say that that is the ideological basis of conflict at the national level. But there is also an ideology of conflict at the regional level, and that is the conflict between Sri Lanka and its neighboring Tamil Nadu, which is a state of modern India, but in the course of history was the geographical basis of several different kingdoms which emerged from time to time. And there is also another level or layer of conflict which is between the island and the global level or the international level, where there is an underlying feeling of threat from the countries of the West, what we could call the modern world. This modern world is seen as trying to dilute the sovereignty of the island and actually to colonize and to exploit the island and oppress its people. I will not immediately go into the details of this ideological nexus, but the first thing to do is to understand that it exists. And its broad impact can be felt by those who take the trouble to listen and watch the cultural expressions that emerge from the island. One of the most noticeable aspects of the cultural expression amongst the Sinhala ethnicity is an underlying tone of sadness. And this is something that is it becomes very obvious. And there is a undertow of this sadness, perhaps one would say depression. This underlying undertow of depression and sadness has to be explored in order to discover what its actual contents are. As it's fairly, as is fairly well known, depression leads to expressions of anger and also fear, and fear also leads to anger. And there is a sort of undertow of resentment. Resentment that the natural development, the natural socio-economic, socio-psychological development of the country has been interrupted from time to time. This is a perception, and this perception is possibly part of the content that generates this sadness and depression. Perception that our psychosocial and socio-economic development has been interrupted from time to time by invaders. And it so happens to be that these the first invaders are Tamils, many of whom are still on the island. Now, this is a perception. I am not talking about history or fact. This is how things are perceived. And this was later followed by European invasions. So we have a history of being invaded again and again and again. And these invasions had their impact on our social structures and processes, internal processes. So this perception tells us that we never really had an opportunity to develop the kind of social structures and processes that we can own, that we feel are our own processes. So there is great sadness. And now this is fairly obvious because it is coming from a large number of people, the majority ethnic group. What is not so obvious is what's going on in the minds of the Tamil people, who are the second largest ethnic group. There are two of them, two Tamil ethnicities. One is we can say the sort of indigenous Tamil ethnicities who may have actually been here from the beginning of history, we do not know. And they have had this conflict with the Sinhalese ethnicities from time to time. And the status quo is that they are the losers. They have lost these conflicts. They have not been able to establish their aspirations or whatever it may be. And that is exactly what happened just a few years ago in 2009. All over again. So exactly how these Tamil people perceive their situation is something that I am not sufficiently familiar with to articulate with any degree of coherence. But I am aware that whatever it is that they perceive, it is quite different from what the Sinhalese community, the Sinhalese ethnic group actually perceive. And then there is another Tamil ethnic community who are of recent Indian origin, that is to say about 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 generations of occupation in the island. They are not really an invading force. They are actually people who were brought here to man the plantation economy under the British colonial government. Now, how they see themselves is quite a different story, is quite different. And again, I am not really competent to comment on that because I have not had the opportunity to interact very deeply with that community. I have had some superficial interactions with them. And but that doesn't really tell me enough to be able to come to any working conclusions. There are also the Moors, or there is an Islamic community, and again, I'm afraid I'm not very familiar with how they perceive themselves and their role in the life of the nation. And there are other smaller ethnic communities, each of whom see things in a way that is particular to their historical experience. Now, as is to be expected, the perceptual framework of the majority ethnic community tends to dominate. So what we have is an island that is submerged in a cloud of sadness and has some resentment and fear of invaders, resentment that it has not been able to establish its own identity and its own institutions and pursue its own aspirations because of these frequent invasions. Now that translates politically into a longing to get back to the past, a past prior to the occurrence of these invasions, and to work forward from that past, that we can say pre-invasionary past. It is a very interesting sort of a position, and its dynamics can be seen very clearly in what happened over the last decade. Anybody trying to attempt to resolve these dynamics and actually generate a new dynamic has to take this into account. This is the importance of the whole thing. It is not enough to take into account simply the perceptual dynamics of the Sinhalese ethnic community. That won't do. One also has to take into account the perceptual dynamics of all the other ethnic groups who live on the island. And based on an understanding of these different perceptions, a perceptual framework has to be generated that makes it possible for these different ethnicities to interact towards the achievement of a common goal, a goal that can be common to them all. So we need a goal, and we need a perceptual framework or a conceptual framework. You need a perceptual framework, and also you need a conceptual framework. You need both. You need a perceptual paradigm. You need a way of seeing not only the island but the world. Because if you see the world as something threatening, something that is trying to invade you, and something that is against your growth and development, you will develop the psychological concomitants, which we could perhaps call paranoia, and which again we have seen over the last 10 years. So this is the big picture task that we are faced with, and it is not an easy task. And to begin with, a lot of people nationally, regionally and globally do not understand this challenge that we face and that we are engaged with. Yes, we are engaged with it. Those of us who are aware of what is happening, we are certainly trying to move forward. And of course, we need all the assistance that can be given to us, and unfortunately not much is coming that way. We have people who are policing us, we have people who are condemning us, we have people who are trying to punish us, and people who are trying to investigate us, and all these we understand are legitimate things that may have to be done, but it should be done on the basis of a very clear understanding of what is happening here. And unfortunately, that understanding of what is really happening here does not seem to be around. At any rate, we do not see it in the kind of expressions that we are encountering.